No one saw this coming. But the truth is finally out. Meri Brown, the initial wife of Kody Brown, had always been a strong presence of quiet strength in a family always in the public spotlight. On Sister Wives, everyone met her as reserved, reflective, and usually the emotional support of the Brown family. Viewers respected her honesty, strength, and patience, qualities that had earned her such respect on and off camera. But beneath that serene facade, Meri held a secret so personal that even her closest relatives didn't know about it. For years, the cameras captured snippets of Meri's life, her moments of vulnerability, her struggles with feeling invisible in a polygamous marriage, and her attempts to find emotional stability amid constant family tension. But there was one part of her life she had never revealed, something that could shake the foundation of the Brown family if it ever came to light. The secret wasn't a trivial detail or a small squabble. It was something that struck at the heart of who she was and influenced how she interacted with every member of the household. It was intimate, intricate, and strong enough to alter the perception that people, both fans and family, had of Meri. And she had borne it in silence for years, juggling the burden of her personal reality against the public image of being Kody's first wife. It all came to a climax on a typical day that turned into one from which no one could ever have predicted. The Brown family was locked in a tense legal battle that had been building over months. It wasn't just a matter of property or domestic arrangements. It had become a battle that tested loyalties, brought out old resentments, and challenged each member of the family to face their own realities. Lawyers, mediators, and family members filled the courtroom, their speech low-key but charged. The media had been tipped off, anticipating the cameras to capture every dramatic turn of events. Meri got to the courthouse that morning early. She had prepared herself for hours mentally, running through the speech that she may have to give, and preparing herself for the questions that would surely arise. Her heart pounded, but her facial expression remained calm. To the outside world, she seemed serene, calm, nearly detached, but in her head, a maelstrom of fear, anticipation, and resolve was brewing. This was the moment she had feared for so long, and the moment she had been preparing for, the moment when her secret would be revealed. When she stepped into the courtroom, the air was charged. Lawyers huddled, whispering to each other, judges fussed with their robes, and cameras pivoted for the perfect shot. The room felt as though it were shrinking under the pressure, as if it could hardly hold the integrity of what was about to happen. And then it did. Her name was called by the judge. "Meri Brown, come forward to the stand," the judge declared, his voice authoritative but unprejudiced. A hush fell over the room. Meri's steps echoed softly against the polished floor as she walked toward the witness stand. Every eye was on her. Robyn and Christine exchanged glances, their curiosity mixed with apprehension. Janelle sat upright, her face a careful mask of neutrality. Kody leaned forward, trying to maintain his composure, yet the tension in his shoulders betrayed his anxiety. Even the legal team seemed momentarily taken aback by the sheer intensity in Meri's gaze. The whispers started soon. Everyone was speculating about what could be so significant that it merited Meri coming onto the stand. Some thought it was something to do with money. Others surmised it might be a domestic squabble over land or inheritance. But the reality was much more entangled and much closer to home than anyone might have predicted. As she sat, the judge nodded curtly, indicating that she should get on with it. Meri drew a deep breath, the eyes of everyone in the room weighing upon her. She knew if she opened her mouth, there was no going back. The cameras rolled, the crowd waited, and the Brown family was looking on, some supporting, some suspicious, and some with openly worried expressions. She started speaking slowly, selecting each word. Initially, it appeared to be standard testimony, descriptions of family choices, how she participated in taking care of specific things around the house, and clearings regarding things already publicly recorded. However, then she began to reveal the deeper truths, the secret parts of her life she had guarded for so long. It began with quiet disclosures, small gestures she had made to ensure her own safety and that of her child, choices that the other wives had overlooked, and private decisions she had made in desperation moments. With every word, the air in the room thickened, each sentence weighing decades of secrecy. Robyn's eyes grew wide. Christine leaned in, Janelle's jaw clenched. Even Kody's face hesitated, a look of uncertainty flashing before his features firmed up again. Next was the segment that really did surprise everyone. The long-buried secret. Meri disclosed that she had been quietly taking care of some of the family's finances on her own, secretly providing for her own security and stability in a home where she frequently felt excluded. She had done it not in deception, but in necessity, a protection against years of emotional abandonment and doubt. Gasps filled the air. Cameras closed in on her face, taking in every twitch of emotion. Legal teams huddled, urgently attempting to grasp the implications. For the Brown family, this news was seismic. It wasn't merely about money, it was about trust, control, and the unspoken power structures that had long governed their relationships. But while the shock was undoubtedly substantial, Meri was calm. She answered in plain and honest terms, with a steady voice and an inner strength that demanded respect. "I did this to defend myself and my child," she declared firmly. "It wasn't intended to hurt anybody, but I couldn't be invisible or powerless in my own house anymore." Her words resonated not just in the courtroom, but far beyond it. Social media users, fans and viewers of Sister Wives, would later describe the moment as unforgettable, a turning point that revealed the depth of Meri's courage and the complexity of her life. The courtroom fell into quiet for a moment, taking in the weight of her admission. And then the questions, difficult, probing, and occasionally accusatory. But Meri met each one with dignity, walking the tightrope of openness and restraint. Each response fortified her stance. She had acted for survival, not ill will. She had sought safety, not vengeance, and above all she had asserted her voice in a household where her emotions had too frequently been discounted. By the end of the session, the atmosphere had transformed. What began as a tense courtroom moment had become a powerful revelation of strength and autonomy. Meri's secret, once hidden in the shadows of her life, now stood boldly in the light, demanding recognition, respect, and understanding. It was a moment that would change the dynamics of the Brown family forever, challenge fan perceptions, and redefine Meri Brown's place not only as the first wife, but as a woman who can hold her own in the most public of spaces. And as she got down from the stand, head held high, the whispers within the room were no longer of disbelief, they were of awe. For the first time in years, Meri Brown had taken back her story, and the world was watching. The courtroom was no longer a forum for legal pleadings. It had become an arena of emotion, secrets, and withheld bitterness. When Meri sat back down after her astonishing disclosure, the tension was palpable. The air felt heavy, suspended, like a storm on the verge of bursting. Each look, each murmur, was charged. Robyn hunched forward a little toward Christine, her eyes wide with shock. "I had no idea," she whispered to herself. Christine's face was just as inscrutable, a cross between shock and something that resembled guilt. Janelle, generally tranquil and controlled, sat rigidly, her jaw stiff, fists tightened on her lap. And Kody's face said what his words could not. For the first time in years, he was lost for words, unsure what to say to the woman whom he had long taken for granted. The tension wasn't merely over money or secret documents. It was more profound than that. It was over acknowledgement, respect, and authority. For many years, Meri had played the quiet witness, forced to step back while the others dominated both family and public life. And now, in one revelation, she had tipped the scales. Lawyers murmured intensely, scurrying through documents, and looking at Meri with new intensity. Each question seemed to be designed to dig deeper, to discover whether her secret had repercussions beyond that which had already been revealed. Some asked questions of money choices. Others attempted to discern the reasons behind her solo actions. But Meri answered with a clear exactness, voice firm, unshakable, and abounding in quiet power. Not being dishonest, she clarified assertively, "I always did what I felt was right for my protection, my child's safety, and my own peace of mind. I never set out to hurt anyone, but I also won't stay in the shadows anymore." Her words were a spark to dry tinder. The family's responses were instant. Robyn's eyes narrowed slightly, admiration and suspicion. Christine exhaled slowly, as if she saw a truth she'd long avoided. Janelle's fingers drummed restlessly on her leg, a nervous habit of anxiety. And Kody, normally so self-assured, stood there at a loss for words. The courtroom observers murmured, wondering what would happen to the family dynamics now. The tension between the wives once contained, now seemed volatile. Years of undeclared rivalries and resentments loomed, and all could sense it. Even outside the courtroom, the ripple effect began almost immediately. Social media buzzed with speculation and fan reactions. Clips of Meri's testimony were shared thousands of times within hours. Comments ranged from admiration, "Meri is finally standing up for herself," to criticism, "How could she do this without telling anyone?" highlighting just how polarizing her revelation was. Inside the courtroom, though, the focus was intensely personal. Every family member had to confront the reality of Meri's actions. Robyn's usual smug confidence was shaken. Christine, known for her charm and diplomacy, seemed caught off guard by the depth of Meri's strength. Janelle, often the mediator, realized that this time even her influence had limits. And Kody, the head of the family, was forced to acknowledge that Meri's courage and independence were not threats. They were truths that demanded respect. Meri felt a strange mix of emotions herself. There was relief, yes, at finally revealing the truth, but also apprehension. How would her family react once the courtroom drama ended? Would Kody understand? Would the other wives resent her? Or would this revelation change everything? One thing was sure, the dynamics of the Brown family had irrevocably changed. Meri was no longer the first wife who sat quietly in the wings. She had asserted her voice, her independence, and her space in a family where these had too often been withheld from her. And as the questioning continued, it became clear that Meri's revelation wasn't just about past actions. It was about setting the stage for the future. Every eye in the room followed her closely, every gesture, every expression scrutinized. The courtroom had transformed into more than a legal arena. It was now a theater of emotions, strategy, and power. Meri's calm exterior hid the storm inside. She knew the next few moments would define how her family and the world would perceive her. And as she prepared to answer the next round of probing questions, she realized something powerful. This was not just about secrets anymore. This was about control, respect, and finally taking her rightful place. Not as a shadow but as a central figure in her own life story. By the end of this dramatic session, the whole room knew one thing. Meri Brown had switched things up. What began as a hushed legal battle had turned into an emotional awakening that made everyone, family, fans, and media, view her in a whole different light. And as the judge called for a short recess, everyone could feel it. The storm wasn't over. The family tensions had only just begun to surface. And Meri's secret was about to trigger a series of confrontations, revelations, and decisions that would test the very core of the Brown household. The instant Meri Brown's bombshell reached the courtroom, the news did not remain within the confines of the courthouse. In minutes, clips of her testimony went viral. Sister Wives fans stayed glued to their devices, reloading social media pages, witnessing every emotion, and sharing clips that embodied the drama of the moment. Meri Brown finally speaks her truth. A headline blared. "First Wife Secret Surprises Brown Family," was the title on another. Public reaction was instant and comprehensive. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook were flooded with tweets, posts, and comments containing a mixture of shock, outrage, and sympathy. While some admired Meri for her boldness, calling her a true queen and the strongest Brown wife, others condemned her, labeling her a deceiver or a betrayer. Each post, comment, and meme stoked the drama, casting Meri into the limelight way beyond the courtroom. Media outlets reported on the story, with journalists dissecting each element of her testimony. Morning television shows argued about whether Meri had been smart or irresponsible. Talk shows featured guests dissecting the family situation, hypothesizing how Kody and the other wives would react. Video clips went viral, garnering millions of views within hours. The whole world appeared to be watching, awaiting the next turn in the drama that was unfolding. Meanwhile, in the courtroom, the Brown family sensed the weight of this public attention. Kody, normally calm and collected, became increasingly agitated with each buzz on his phone. Robyn, Christine, and Janelle nervously exchanged glances, each quietly wondering how this bombshell would impact their own position in the family and in the public eye. Each murmur outside the courtroom appeared exaggerated, each response magnified by the fact that millions were tuning in. Meri, though, was not shaken. She knew the value of her words and the message they could convey. The social media uproar was exhilarating and also frightening. She had never been anything but a shadow of the public image of her family, and had felt overshadowed and undervalued by them before. Now, for the first time in her life, her voice counted, not only to her family, but to the public who considered her a symbol of strength, autonomy, and courage. Throughout the day, online arguments heated up. Supporters developed hashtags. Meri speaks, first wife strength, and sister wives drama. Memes were circulated depicting shocked faces of the members of the family from the courtroom scene. Comment sections blew up with fervent opinions. Some supporters were on her side, feeling sympathetic towards her in a polygamous family. Others were skeptical of her intentions, believing secrets in a family this celebrity-oriented could never remain a secret. The media attention piled on. Expert interviews, family therapists, and reality TV commentators dominated the airwaves. Headlines included sympathetic, Meri Brown's bold move against invisibility, and sensationalist, first wife secrets threaten the Brown family empire. The world was a jury, and everyone had a verdict. But the Brown family weren't merely responding to the public, they were responding to one another. The courtroom had exposed not just Meri's secret, but long-simmering tensions among the wives. Every whisper and side glance hinted at old rivalries resurfacing. Robyn's confidence appeared shaken as she realized that Meri's revelation had shifted the family dynamic in subtle yet powerful ways. Christine's charm and diplomacy seemed less effective in the face of raw honesty. Janelle, more often than not the peacemaker, felt like she was losing her role as a force behind family decisions. And Kody, always the impartial patriarch of the family, had an unwelcome realization: Meri had asserted a power he could not even dismiss. The outcry from the public wasn't merely internet noise. It was affecting the family's choices and behaviors. Every step was subject to scrutiny, every exchange of words possibly recorded, dissected, and disseminated. Social media had become an extension of the court of law, with millions of admirers serving as both jury and spectators. Meri, seeing the stakes, remained steadfast. She understood that this public exposure would challenge her relationships but also seize the opportunity. By holding her ground, she had not only laid bare a truth, but had also taken back her story. For years, she had been defined as the quiet, second-rate first wife. Now she was the star of a story that was captivating millions of people all over the globe. As evening fell, the courtroom cleared, but the storm continued outside. News reports recapped the day's events. Fans continued to debate, post, and share, and the Brown family faced the reality that their lives had changed in an instant. Meri's revelation had sparked a chain reaction that could not be undone. And through all of this turmoil, one thing was certain: the world had seen more than a secret. It had seen a change. Meri Brown was no longer only the first wife. She was a woman who had commandeered her narrative, weathered public criticism, and emerged with a ferocity that commanded respect. The outcry was only the start. Questions still abounded, tensions still existed, and emotions were still high. But one thing was certain: Meri Brown had made headlines around the globe, and her tale was far from done. The courtroom had emptied, but the aftershocks of Meri Brown's confession still resonated within the Brown family. For the first time in years, the wives and Kody were forced to face the truth, not on camera but in person. The air was thick with tension, a combination of shock, anger, and unspoken respect. Meri walked into the family living room, her stance cool but her heart racing. She recognized this moment would prove every relationship, every loyalty, and every boundary she had walked for so long. Kody edged on the sofa, his normally calm face altered by an unfamiliar uncertainty. Robyn folded her arms, eyes keen as Christine's face fluctuated between curiosity and discomfort. Janelle stood in the doorway, hands together, a quiet witness to the tempest about to ensue. Meri spoke, her voice firm and steady, breaking the silence. "I didn't do this to hurt anybody," she started, her eyes locking with Kody's. "I did this to keep myself and my baby safe. I've been a part of this family for years, and I'm entitled to respect, honesty, and being noticed." not just ignored. A sharp intake of breath from Robyn signaled the tension she felt. Christine's lips pressed tightly, her mind racing with thoughts unspoken for years. Janelle's hands trembled slightly, a mix of anxiety and empathy showing through. Even Kody struggled for words, realizing that Meri's quiet strength had shifted the household dynamic in ways he hadn't anticipated. Robyn finally broke her silence, speaking in a low, measured tone. "Meri, I didn't know. Why could you not say anything to anyone about this?" Meri's eyes grew soft, but her voice was firm. "I wasn't doing it out of spite. I did it because I needed to gain some control over my own life. Something that I've not had for a very long time within this family." Christine leaned in, her own voice barely above a whisper. "Meri, we all thought you were fine. We didn't know." She stopped, seeing how assumptions had blinded her to Meri's battles. Janelle took another step forward, her composure regained, but the intensity in her words. "Meri, it's difficult to see someone we care about suffer in silence. But now that I see, I get why you did what you did. I just wish we'd known sooner." Kody, generally the peacekeeper, leaned back, considering his own faults. "Meri, I didn't see it. I didn't catch the magnitude of your struggle. I always believed I was being in balance, but you've taught me that I miss so much." The room was heavy with raw emotion. Tears welled up in some eyes. Others held a mixture of relief and remorse. Meri's revelation had sparked not just a confrontation but an awakening. The family had to face years of overlooked feelings, unspoken resentments, and silent struggles. Meri went on, her voice increasing quiet confidence. "This isn't about putting blame. It's about acknowledging the truth. I've always loved this family, and I want to be part of it, not as a ghost but as someone respected and heard." Robyn's arms fell a little bit, and she softened her tone. I get it, Meri, it's a lot to process. But I see your strength, and I admire that." Christine nodded, the strain in her shoulders dissolving. Janelle smiled softly, indicating approval. Even Kody, who was chastened, acknowledged Meri's bravery. In that room, years of barriers came tumbling down. What began as argument translated into respect, understanding, and even adoration. The emotional toll of years of silence, neglect, and unexpressed feelings was finally released. Meri's actions had not only exposed a personal secret, they had forced a reckoning, a realignment of relationships, and a deeper understanding among the Brown family. Each member had to reassess their perceptions, their roles, and their responsibilities to one another. This encounter was a catharsis for Meri. She had mastered the lesson that holding her ground and expressing her truth had changed not just how others perceived her, but how she perceived herself. No longer was she defined by her status as the first wife, only she was a woman who wouldn't be ignored, recognized, and treated with fairness. The emotional battle left the family raw but resilient. Bridges that had long been tenuous were starting to strengthen. Conversations that had once appeared impossible were now opening doors to honesty, vulnerability, and possible reconciliation. At the end of the night, tension had given way to calm. All wounds were not healed, but steps toward healing had been made. Meri had confronted the emotions of her family and come out with dignity and strength. She had taken a secret that might have created division and turned it into a call to truth, empowerment, and strengthened family ties. And as the evening came to an end, one thing was certain: the Brown family and the fans watching at home would never look at Meri Brown the same way again. The storm was over, but the storm's aftermath remained. Meri Brown had exposed her secret, confronted her family in a tearful confrontation, and now the family was left to absorb what had actually changed. The Brown family, once characterized by silent tensions and muted struggles, now stood at a fork in the road, and at the center of it all stood Meri, stronger, wiser, and unshakably resolute. For Meri, the days after the courtroom disclosure were a blend of relief, tension, and empowerment. Fans continued to inundate social media with support, admiration, and wondering what she would do next. The hashtags #MeriSpeaks and #FirstWifeStrength trended for days, demonstrating the world that her courage had resonated far beyond her own circle. People who had also experienced similar struggles of feeling invisible, overlooked, or stuck in bad relationships commented that they saw themselves in Meri, a symbol of strength, Within the family, the tension that had once characterized their relationship started to dissipate. Kody, who had all too often taken for granted the quiet strength of Meri, approached her with fresh respect. "Meri," he told her one night, his voice firm but earnest, "I see how much I've taken for granted. I can't erase the past, but I want to honor your strength and the sacrifices you've made all these years." Robyn, Christine, and Janelle also began to see Meri in a new light. Robyn softened, admitting that she had often underestimated Meri's intelligence and determination. Christine, who had relied heavily on charm and diplomacy, found herself admiring Meri's courage and authenticity. And Janelle, the family mediator, recognized that Meri's actions had created an opportunity for honesty and growth that they had all long avoided. Meri's secret, once a potential source of division, had instead become a catalyst for connection. It forced the family to confront uncomfortable truths, to acknowledge past mistakes, and to embrace a future that allowed each member to be seen and respected. For the first time in years, the Brown family could begin to rebuild their bonds on a foundation of transparency and mutual understanding. Meri herself felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. She knew that taking her voice and her space in the family had earned her more than respect. It had earned her freedom. Freedom from invisibility. Freedom from fear. Freedom to create her own story, on her own terms. And glancing around the family living room one night, she saw subtle but compelling alterations. The talking was freer, the interactions more authentic, and the unspoken pecking order that had loomed over her existence for so long started to come into equilibrium. It wasn't flawless, there were still struggles, miscommunications, and emotions to sort through. But for the first time, Meri felt like an equal member of her own life. The public too continued to watch and respond. Fans celebrated her bravery, media outlets praised her strength, and social media became a platform for discussions about resilience, independence, and self-respect. Meri's story had transcended the confines of reality television. It had become a message to anyone who had ever felt overlooked or undervalued. Your voice matters, and your courage can change everything. Over the coming weeks, Meri devoted herself to creating a life outside the shadows of concealment. She built a stronger bond with her child, worked on personal ambitions she had long deferred, and opened herself up to opportunities to reveal her story to the world. Every step reaffirmed in her that honesty, courage, and truth were not just values. They were instruments of empowerment. Even among the Brown family, changes were subtle. Kody demonstrated increased attentiveness and comprehension, admitting to valuing equality and respect for one another. The other wives also were standing back to reflect upon their own places, realizing that honesty and vulnerability were not weaknesses but a strength. Meri's redemption was not about defeating anyone or asserting superiority. It was about reclaiming her own identity. She had transformed her secret, once a source of potential shame or conflict, into a platform for empowerment. She had turned vulnerability into strength, silence into voice, and invisibility into presence. And thus Meri Brown's tale had come to a powerful end. The original wife who had long been underestimated, overlooked, and quiet had become an icon of strength, endurance, and individual empowerment. She had weathered the tempest, stood up to her own family, and endured the public backlash. And in doing so had demonstrated to the world that being one's own advocate is never a frailty, but the greatest manifestation of strength. To the audience, it was more than reality television drama. It was a lesson. A lesson that honesty can heal, truth can empower, and courage can change not only your life, but the lives of all of those around you. As the camera moves back, showing Meri smiling softly at her child, with her family around her who now views her differently, one thing is certain. The world had seen a change. Meri Brown had come out of the shadows, and no one would ever render her invisible again.